Have you ever sat in a quiet room with the television off, no one calling, no one coming by, and suddenly felt that heaviness settle in your chest? Not sadness exactly, not boredom either. Just this strange, quiet ache that whispers, "Is this it now?" If that sounds familiar, you're not alone. And no, you're not weak or broken for feeling that way. You see, after a certain age, something shifts. Children grow up, friends move away, people we love pass on, and the once busy rhythms of daily life begin to slow. The silence that once felt like a luxury suddenly becomes a daily companion. And in that quiet, something unexpected often creeps in: loneliness. But here's the thing. What if that loneliness isn't the enemy we think it is? Today, I want to talk with you, not at you, about something deeply important. Something many of us feel, but few ever really speak about: the fear of being alone. But even more than that, I want to gently offer you a new perspective, one inspired by the wisdom of depth psychology. Loneliness isn't a punishment. It can be an opportunity, a door. And once you understand what's behind that door, you might stop fearing it and start embracing it. Let's begin with something very human. For most of our lives, we've been surrounded by noise. Not just actual sound, but the busyness of it all. Raising families, working, hosting gatherings, being needed. That busyness became part of our identity. But then the roles begin to fade. No more early morning rush. Fewer reasons to dress up or leave the house. People don't call as often. And then the silence creeps in. But silence doesn't just reveal the world outside, it reveals the world within. And for many of us, that's the part we haven't truly visited in a very long time. It's been said that loneliness does not come from having no people around, but from being unable to communicate the things that matter most to us. Isn't that the truth? It's not just about being alone in a room. It's about feeling unseen, unheard. Like the deepest parts of you, the dreams, the fears, the memories, have no place to go. And when you try to share those feelings, maybe people brush them off. They say, "Just keep busy," or "Don't think too much." But we do think. We remember. We ache. And that's okay. What if I told you that those thoughts and feelings aren't here to hurt you, but to guide you? You see, the ache we call loneliness often isn't just about missing others. It's about missing yourself. The you that's been buried under decades of being strong for others. The you that had to keep going, keep pleasing, keep sacrificing. Now that the world has grown quiet, that version of you, the real you, is knocking, asking, "Can we talk now?" And that conversation, as strange as it may sound, is the beginning of healing. Now, this might feel unfamiliar, maybe even a little scary. Many of us were never taught how to sit with ourselves. We were raised to keep moving, to stay productive, to push feelings down and soldier on. But what if this stage of life isn't about pushing anymore? What if it's about opening? Imagine this. You're sitting on your porch, the wind is light, and the day is calm. You're not thinking about what needs to get done or who you need to take care of. You're just breathing. And slowly, almost quietly, something inside you begins to surface. Maybe an old memory, a buried dream, or just a quiet sadness you never had time to feel. That moment is not a weakness. That is a sacred moment. It's your soul saying, "I'm still here." It's been said that inside each of us, there are parts we've forgotten. Some call them shadows, not because they're bad, but because we've hidden them. They are the feelings we weren't allowed to show, the dreams we gave up, the truths we buried so we could be who the world needed us to be. And now, in the quiet of later life, these shadows come to visit, not to haunt us, but to help us come home to ourselves. So the next time you feel that ache in the silence, try this. Don't rush to fill it. Don't turn the TV on right away. Don't grab your phone. Just sit. Breathe. Ask yourself gently, what am I really feeling? It might be sadness. It might be regret. But it might also be longing, a longing not for others, but for connection to the parts of yourself you haven't touched in years. And in that quiet, something magical can happen. You might start to feel not loneliness but presence. The kind of presence that doesn't need anything outside to feel whole. The kind of presence that says, I'm enough, just like this. Think back to when you were younger. Remember those rare moments when you were alone, but completely content? Maybe you were gardening, or watching the sunset, or reading something that stirred your soul. Those moments weren't lonely, were they? They were peaceful, full, complete. That's the kind of solitude some thinkers speak of. Not isolation, but sacred space. And here's the most beautiful part. The more we allow ourselves to be present with who we are, not who we were, not who others want us to be, the more connected we feel. Ironically, when we stop chasing connection, that's when it finds us. Have you ever met someone who seems completely at peace with themselves? They don't talk too much, but when they do, it matters. They have a calmness about them, like they're not trying to prove anything. That kind of presence doesn't come from crowds or noise. It comes from solitude, from sitting with their own truths, from learning to befriend themselves. You have that power too. It's not too late. It doesn't matter if you're 60, 70, or 90. You still have a soul inside that wants to be heard, that wants to be held. And the doorway to that soul isn't locked. It's wide open. All it asks is that you stop running from the silence and start listening to what's waiting inside it. You see, the fear of loneliness isn't really about being alone. It's about feeling like we've lost touch with something deeper, but that something has never left you. It's just been waiting for a quieter moment to speak. And now, in this new chapter of life, that moment is here. So maybe, just maybe, this season of quiet is not the end of your story. Maybe it's the beginning of the truest one yet. And maybe now, as you're sitting with yourself a little longer, you start to notice something surprising. The silence isn't as heavy as it once felt. There's a certain lightness to it, a space where something new might grow. That's not an accident. That's what happens when you stop fearing your own presence. The moment you stop trying to outrun the quiet, you begin to understand it's not empty. It's full of truth. You see, for most of our lives, we're taught to measure our worth by how much we do, how many people we care for, how productive we are. And when those roles fade, as they often do with age, we're left wondering, if I'm not needed, do I still matter? But what if your value was never about what you did for others? What if it was about simply being? It's been said that we carry within us all the wisdom we'll ever need, but most of us are too distracted, too busy, or too afraid to listen. When life finally quiets down, we're gifted something precious, the chance to hear that inner voice again. Not the voice that criticizes or doubts, but the deeper one. The one that remembers who you are beneath all the layers you've worn. Sometimes that voice shows up in unexpected ways. Maybe in the sudden memory of your younger self, or in the ache of a long-buried dream, or in the realization that you've spent years being who others needed you to be, and now you're being invited to become who you need you to be. That's not selfish. That's sacred. But let's be honest, this path isn't always gentle. When we finally slow down, a lot can come to the surface. Old grief, past regrets, questions we never had time to ask, feelings we were told to ignore. It can feel like standing in front of a mirror you've avoided for years. But that mirror isn't there to shame you. It's there to show you just how much you've survived, how much you've carried, and how deeply you've loved, even if that love wasn't always returned. Some people might tell you to stay busy, to keep distracted, to not think too much. But distraction is not healing. Numbing is not the same as peace. There's a quiet strength in turning toward the discomfort, in saying, I'm ready to meet whatever I've hidden. That's the kind of strength that builds wisdom, not the kind in books, but the kind that lives in the bones. The kind that says, I've lived, I've lost, and I'm still here. Think of your soul like a garden. For years you've been planting for others, children, partners, co-workers, friends. You've watered their dreams, pulled weeds from their pain, and sat with them through many seasons. But now, this is your season. A time to turn inward, to tend to the soil of your own being. It may be overgrown. It may be cracked and dry, but it is still yours. And it can bloom again, perhaps more beautifully than ever. And yes, it takes courage. There's a saying, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. That means healing doesn't always come from looking for the positive. It comes from facing what we've long avoided, from holding the sadness, the fear, the loneliness, not as enemies, but as messengers. So if you've been waking up with that ache in your chest, that question in your heart, I want you to hear this clearly. You are not broken. You are not failing. You are awakening. You're peeling back layers that no longer serve you. You're releasing the need to perform, to please, to prove. You're beginning to see that your worth is not based on how many people call you or how many tasks you complete. Your worth is in your being, in your breath, in your heart that still longs to give and feel and be seen, even if only by you. And as you begin to make peace with that part of yourself, something shifts. The loneliness doesn't vanish overnight, but it softens. It becomes less like a void and more like a room you've finally decided to decorate. You might find yourself talking to your own thoughts, smiling at your own memories, laughing out loud at something only you would understand. That's not madness. That's the return of companionship with yourself. And here's a beautiful truth. The more at peace you become in your own company, the more meaningful your connections with others will be. Because you're no longer looking to others to fill a hole. You're sharing from a full place, a place of wholeness. So take your walk slowly. Listen to the wind in the trees. Sit with a cup of tea and watch the way the sunlight falls on the floor. Let the world remind you that you are a part of it, not forgotten, not left behind, but simply invited to see it from a new angle. And don't be afraid to feel it all. The grief, the joy, the longing, the relief. They all belong. They're all part of the tapestry of your life. You've earned the right to feel deeply, to question bravely, to rest fully. This is not the ending of your story. It's the most honest chapter yet. A chapter where you're not playing a role. You're not chasing applause. You're simply being. And in that being, there is power. There is peace. There is presence. Let yourself lean into that. Not just today, but every day. You don't need to fix anything. You don't need to rush toward a goal. You just need to stay. Stay with yourself. Stay with the truth that you are enough, just as you are, right here, in this moment. And as you stay, really stay with yourself, a new kind of quiet begins to emerge. Not the kind that feels hollow or isolating, but one that feels safe, grounded, almost like a gentle hum inside your chest. You start to realize that this silence you used to dread is actually the very place where your truest self has been waiting all along. It's like meeting an old friend you forgot you had. At first, it's awkward. Maybe you don't recognize them fully. But as you sit together, day by day, you begin to remember. You remember your own voice, not the one shaped by what others expected, but the one that's been quietly whispering truths all along. The voice that knows what you value, what you miss, what you still dream about in the quiet corners of your heart. Healing isn't about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you already are. And that means gathering the pieces of yourself you left behind, sometimes out of survival, sometimes out of love, sometimes because the world simply didn't make space for them. But now you can make that space. You can welcome the emotions you once avoided. You can mourn the things you lost and the people you miss. You can forgive the younger version of yourself who didn't know what you know now. And you can do it all without needing anyone's permission, because your healing belongs to you. And here's something else that might surprise you. As you become more at peace with your own presence, your relationships change. Not just the ones you have now, but even the way you hold memories of the past. You may begin to look back at people who hurt you and feel less anger, more clarity. You might revisit old regrets and realize you did the best you could with what you knew then. That's what it means to integrate your shadow, not to chase perfection, but to welcome all of who you are. It's not about being flawless. It's about being whole. You no longer need to split yourself into the acceptable parts and the unacceptable ones. All of it, your joys, your mistakes, your fears, your courage, it all belongs. And that, my friend, is freedom. Not the kind that comes from doing whatever you want, but the kind that comes from being fully at home with who you are. And when you begin living from that place, something shifts. The way you wake up in the morning, the way you look out the window, the way you speak to yourself, even the way you interact with others. You stop needing to prove your worth. You stop performing. You begin to simply live, fully, authentically, quietly powerful. Some people may not understand this change in you. That's okay. Not everyone is meant to walk this part of the path with you. But those who do, the ones who truly see you, will be drawn not to the version of you that tries to please, but to the version of you that radiates peace. And yes, you can still laugh. You can still dance. You can still dream. This wholeness doesn't take away your joy. It deepens it. Because now your joy isn't a mask. It's a reflection of something real, rooted deep in the ground of your soul. And your sadness? That's allowed too. You don't have to hide it. You don't have to rush it away. You can sit with it, knowing it doesn't make you weak. It makes you honest. And honesty, in this season of life, is a sacred kind of strength. So if you ever find yourself in a quiet room again, feeling that familiar ache creeping in, I want you to remember this. What you're feeling isn't the absence of love. It's the presence of your soul, asking to be heard. And you have everything you need to listen. You don't need to be fixed. You don't need to be more productive. You don't need to be anything other than what you are right now, a human being, worthy of love, connection, and peace, no matter your age, no matter your history. And maybe that's the most important truth of all. Loneliness is not your enemy. It's your teacher. It doesn't show up to punish you. It shows up to guide you home. So take this moment right here as an invitation. Not to change who you are, but to return to who you've always been, before the roles, before the masks, before the noise. Return to that quiet, knowing presence inside you. That is your real home. That is your real power. And if this message has touched you, even just a little, I want you to know something. You are not alone. You are part of a quiet revolution, one where people are no longer afraid of solitude, one where we finally stop running and start embracing who we truly are. You, sitting there right now, listening, feeling, breathing, that's what this journey is about. Let your story unfold from here with softness and strength. Let your days be filled not just with activity, but with presence. And when the silence comes again, as it always does, welcome it like an old friend, knowing it has something beautiful to show you. So here we are. You've made it to this moment, still breathing, still listening, still here. And that, in itself, is something to be proud of. Life has asked a lot of you. It's taken you through highs and lows, joy and heartbreak, laughter and tears. You've shown up for others more times than anyone could count. And now the time has come to show up for yourself, not as a project to be fixed, not as a list of things to improve, but as a soul that has carried so much and still stands, still feels, still hopes, And yes, maybe still aches sometimes. But that ache, it's not weakness. It's the pulse of a heart that still longs to live deeply and love fully. It's been said that our most profound growth often begins in the quietest places, not in the applause, not in the approval of others, but in the stillness, where we finally hear the voice we've silenced for far too long, our own. That voice is sacred, and it's calling you not to do more, but to be more of who you already are. You might be wondering, but what now? What do I do with this? And the truth is, you don't need to do anything grand. Just begin where you are. Maybe that means spending a little more time outside, watching the birds without distraction. Maybe it's journaling some of the thoughts that come up in the quiet. Maybe it's letting yourself cry when memories wash over you, without shame, without judgment. Or maybe it's as simple as waking up each morning, placing a hand over your heart and saying, "I'm still here, and that's enough." Healing is not about erasing your past. It's about honoring it, integrating it, and carrying it differently. It's looking at the pieces you thought were too broken to matter and realizing they are part of your strength. They are proof that you've lived and that you've kept going. You see, the world may tell you that aging means fading away. But that's not true. Aging means deepening, like the roots of a tree growing stronger even as the branches weather the storms. You are not disappearing. You are becoming more real than you've ever been. So if today feels quiet, let it be sacred. If you feel unseen, remember, you see yourself now. And that's where everything begins. There is no one on this planet with your exact story, your exact scars, your exact smile. You are not behind. You are not late. You are right on time for your own unfolding. And whether you're surrounded by people or sitting alone in a quiet room, you are never truly alone, because the soul that's been waiting for your attention has always been there. You don't need to seek out purpose in big gestures. Sometimes purpose is found in lighting a candle, in listening to your breath, in remembering that the life you're living now, no matter how different it looks, still holds meaning, still holds beauty, still holds you. So please, be gentle with yourself. Speak kindly. Move slowly. Let each moment be enough. Don't rush to fill the silence. Listen to it. Don't fear the ache. Tend to it. And when you do, you'll start to feel the shift. That emptiness, it starts to feel like a soft, open field. That loneliness, it becomes a path home. And if you ever forget how valuable you are, come back to this space. Come back to your breath, to your memories, to your heart. Let them remind you that you are not just a name on a calendar or a number in an age group. You are a life, a legacy, a light. I want to thank you for spending this time with me, for being willing to sit with difficult truths, and for choosing not to turn away. That kind of courage is quiet, but it is life-changing. If anything in this message resonated with you, even just a sentence, I'd love to hear about it. Leave a comment below. Share your story, your thoughts, or even just a word that stayed with you. And if you know someone who needs to hear this too, send it their way. Because healing, though deeply personal, is never something we have to do completely alone. And if you haven't already, go ahead and hit that like button. Subscribe if you'd like more videos that speak to the heart, that honor the journey of becoming, not just younger, but truer. And turn on notifications so you don't miss what comes next. We're building something beautiful here, and there's a place in it for you. Here's to you, your strength, your softness, your story. Here's to living not in fear of being alone, but in wonder at what you might find in your own company. Here's to becoming, at any age, fully and unapologetically, yourself. You were never just lonely. You were always being called home. And now, you've answered. Take a deep breath. Place a hand on your heart. You're not alone. You're alive. You're home.